Hey, everybody, welcome to another episode of the Meet the Candidates series. I am Jimmy, and I am looking forward to talking to all of the candidates for Cambridge City Council and Cambridge School Committee for the 2023 election. Right now, we have a first-time candidate. Please, ladies and gentlemen, welcome Mr. Doug Brown to the show. Doug, say hello to everybody.
Hi, everybody. Thanks for hosting, Jimmy. Really appreciate this opportunity.
You are welcome. So tell me, Doug, give us a little bit about your background and how long have you lived in Cambridge?
Well, I've been here for 24 years. I actually moved here for Y2K.
Wow.
You can remember when that was.
Yes.
I now am married. I have 3 kids, and I'm a stay-at-home dad. So my background's a little bit different. I worked in the software industry for a long time and education before that. But I've been home with kids for the last 9 years. And during that time, it's allowed me to work on a fair number of city-related issues.
Mm-hmm. Like what?
Well, climate is one issue that I think is a pretty important issue right now. So I was involved as the co-chair of the Climate Resilient Zoning Task Force for the city. Housing is always a big issue in Cambridge. We're growing. We've added 10,000 people in the last 8 years. And so the housing demands are always a challenge. And I'd like to see us do more with middle income housing. You know, we often, the folks in the middle sometimes get squeezed from both ends.
Right. So did your service in those positions inform your desire to run? Is that why you got involved?
Yeah. I mean, I think partly I finally got a green light from my wife because with 3 little kids at home, it can be challenging, but they've grown up enough that, the idea of being away at dinner time is reasonable.
Right.
But I think it's also that we, as a city, we still are facing a number of challenges. We've been a very successful city over the years, particularly over the last 20 years. But we also struggle with some issues that come along with that. Mm-hmm. So prices are expensive. Things like after school and childcare are really competitive for people to find.
Right.
We probably could still use some zoning reform, though I don't know that I'm necessarily a proponent of skyscrapers, but I think maybe some moderate zoning reform across the entire city. Mm-hmm. Obviously transportation is a big issue this year, particularly bike safety and bike lanes.
Mm-hmm. So tell me what you think the city and the schools are doing good. Are your kids in the schools as well?
They were. I had 2 kids at Haggerty through 5th grade. But they're both dyslexic. So they're now at the Carroll School, which is a dyslexic specific school out in Lincoln. Mm-hmm. I think they do some things good. I think sometimes boys that are dyslexic or ADHD, it can be a challenge to teach them in some cases. Mm-hmm. And so I'd like to see more different approaches to how we sort of deal with that. I think there has been a little bit of a flight from the public schools, especially in middle school. And I think that's still a challenge, is we have to really look at what we're doing for middle school. That's less of a city council issue, but at the same time, I think the city council has purvey over after school programs, for example, and we still have quite a long list of waitlisted families. And so I'd like to really see us address that. We actually were on the wait list for 2 years before we were able to get a slot. Mm. And I think for families where there's 2 working parents, that can be a real challenge for them.
Mm-hmm. So if you were to be elected, what are some of the top 3 to 5 priorities that you'd like to focus on and hopefully improve upon in this?
I think, first on the housing point, I think we really do need to look at some programs that will help with the middle income folks. I think if you're wealthy, you can afford to stay in Cambridge. And if you're less wealthy, you can't really afford to leave, because we do have good affordable housing options in some cases. But I think the folks in the middle who can't really afford to stay but can afford to leave, that's a challenge. And we've seen a real hollowing out in the middle. And so I'd like to see more programs around middle income housing. I'd like to see some of the affordable housing money go to middle income programs. And some of that may be home ownership programs, and some of it may be community land trusts that actually allow people to afford houses. But I think it's important that we don't forget about the folks in the middle too.
Right. The state, obviously this is a statewide issue as well. And I was reading, I think it was Boston, I think it was Mayor Wu. I'm not sure if the state agrees with this or not, or if this is part of their platform, but she was talking about looking at these vacancies, these commercial buildings that are vacant, that have huge vacancies, and trying to convert them to housing. Do you think that's something that the city could or would explore, or would you support something like that?
It's challenging because I would say that local retail is also struggling right now too, and so I'd hate to pit those two things against each other. But on the subject of vacancy, one thing I would say is that for the last year that I saw statistics, which was 2020, our vacancy rate and on the residential side was about 10%. So that means there's a significant number of units, thousands of units that are empty right now. And I think some of that is investment. They're held as investment properties. And I think some of it may be that in some cases you own a two-family and one of the units isn't in good enough shape to be able to rent it out. So you need help to fix it up. And so I think there's things you can do to attack that vacancy rate. Some of it may be using a stick, which is like a vacancy tax. Buildings shouldn't really sit unused.
Right.
But other things are more incentive-based. So you can give people grants to fix those units up and get them back into the market.
That's surprising that 10% of the housing stock is vacant in the city. I don't think most people are aware of that, because the opposite is always, it seems to be the case, that there's no housing available.
Right. Yeah, and I think in some cases there are reasons why someone's not putting that out there, and so I think we really need to investigate why that is. But that's the numbers that you see in some of the reports that have been out over the last few years. And I know that's a big issue in other cities as well.
Right. So you got housing. What else would you hope to work on?
Well, I think I'm informed. My platform is really focused on families, and that's because that's my current experience. That's what I'm doing right now. And so housing is important. And I mentioned childcare options are important. I think climate is important. Anybody with kids is concerned about what we're leaving to our kids in the future. And, so I've done a lot of work on the climate resiliency side, which is sort of how people are protected from changes in the environment. I think we still have a lot of discussion to do on the other side, decarbonization, and the idea that we got to protect the environment from people. But I think that's been something I've worked on quite a bit, and I think there's still more to do. I would like to see us push more in areas like electric vehicle charging, for example. I think our rollout of electric vehicle charging stations has been very slow. And so those kind of have remained an option mostly for wealthy people who can install their own charger. And I'd like to see more chargers across the city so that folks that are not as fortunate can still take advantage of that, or folks that are in apartment buildings where there's a limited number of chargers. I think the other thing for me that's important is around zoning reform. And I think there are a lot of places where families often struggle because they want to add a bedroom, or they want to add a bathroom, or they want to make some basic changes to their house. And because so much of our city is non-conforming, they often have to hire an architect, hire a lawyer, go before a board, get an approval. And I've been through that process, and it takes months, if not years in some cases. And so I think some level of incremental zoning reform to just make it easier to sort of live in the houses that we already have, I think is important. And then, other issues that are important to families, I think those are all issues that everybody cares about. I think, families have their own specific needs. I would love to see a public bathroom in every park and playground in this city. I think that's a good goal to shoot for. Too many times, you end up not having somewhere to go. Youth sports is also obviously something close to my heart as a youth sports coach.
Right. What do you coach?
I coach flag football and I coach baseball.
Cool.
And I love it.
Yeah.
And I think you can't have too much youth sports.
Right. Tell me, what organizations, if any, have endorsed you?
I've been endorsed by the CCC, the Cambridge Citizens Coalition, and also by the Cambridge Residents Alliance, the CRES-A. And both of those are organizations that I've been involved with in the past, and I appreciate their support. I've had sort of a back and forth with Cambridge Bike Safety. I really support what they're trying to do, but I think it's a really challenging issue right now because there's a lot of competing interests. And again, as my background is as someone who's operating in this city is trying to get a family around. I actually sort of fall somewhere in the middle in that, bikes are often the best option to get your kids places. And there's other times when you really have to drive. And so, you have to sort of have this balance. I am a big fan of some of what's been built. I think other things that have been built have been more challenging for people, often because they're not familiar with them. If you go to other cities in other countries, often people have been doing it for longer and they've gotten used to how they operate. So I think we do need to do a better job about how we roll some of these things out, how we sort of teach people about them, and also how we listen to input. I was at a meeting today about bike lanes on Huron Avenue. And, the opinions in some of the neighborhoods are very strong about what's happening and how we need to really be clear about what we're doing so we don't make it worse in some cases.
Right. So obviously you're open to community involvement, tweaking.
Oh, for sure.
Tweaking.
Whatever the issue is, I think that's critical. I'm an officer of my local neighborhood association. One of my big concerns with the affordable housing overlay has been the removal of neighborhood input. Mm-hmm. I think neighborhood input, community input, whatever you want to call it, I think makes better outcomes. I don't think it is a problem. I think it's actually part of the how you improve a project.
Mm-hmm. So Doug Brown, where can people find out about you? Where can they volunteer? Where can they message you? Where can they learn about your campaign? Where can they maybe make a large donation? Where would they go?
Well, the easiest thing is my website. So that's brownforcouncil.com. And there you can find some information about me, information about some of these issues we've talked about, and also how to get in touch with me, how to donate. And I just got a brand new batch of yard signs and how you can get one.
Great. Well, congratulations on your candidacy, Doug. Great to have you on the show today. Wishing you the best of luck. Thank you so much for joining us.